Hello friends, a warm welcome to this session. Let us continue with the discussion pertaining to nonverbal communication. Today I am going to talk about the another aspect of nonverbal communication, that is haptics, which is derived from the Greek word haptikos and plays a very important role in communication. So, when we talk about haptics, basically we are going to talk about the touch, the most intimate and sophisticated senses among all the 5 senses that any human possess, and how touch plays important role in communicating a message. So, haptic communication is a branch of non-verbal communication that refers to the ways in which people communicate and interact via the sense of touch. So, we pat our co-workers back, we shake hands, it can be very soft, it can be very gentle, it can be very hard, it can be harsh. So, these kind of touches will convey a message to the other person about recognizing his presence or not, or recognizing an individual's performance. So, touch is the most sophisticated and intimate of the 5 senses we have, but how to understand that touch, that is very important. So, OB professionals have talked about certain categories of haptics, where every touch has some kind of orientation. It can be an emotional orientation, it can be task orientation, it can be a sense of ritual, or it can be some emotional attachment. So, the point is that if I say that how we can understand that touch, so there are certain categories which define that whenever a person is touching an individual, what is the sensation, what is the orientation of that sensation will convey the message to the other person. So, the first category is functional or professional expression. So, the first category of haptics, that is the touch, is in terms of the touch and individual experiences at workplaces. So, this category has task orientation. Task orientation here, whether the person is motivating the other person, for example, patting the back, or holding his hand in sense of cooperating with him, or need some cooperation from the other person. So, managers should know the effectiveness of using touch while communicating with subordinates, but need to be cautious and understand how touch can be misunderstood in certain manner. It is both the ways. If it has a positive connotation, then any touch can also have some to be careful connotations, because it can be sometimes misunderstood. For instance, a hand on the shoulder for one person may mean a supportive gesture. So, any co-worker who puts his hand on the other co-worker's shoulder, that means there is some support that is coming from one person to another. The boss who pats the back of his co-worker, definitely that is about acknowledging or recognizing his good performance. Or sometimes any touch can also mean a sexual advance to another person. So, this is something that an individual will interpret based on his senses, the touch, and what kind of touch has been sensed by the another person, that is the target person, that will define whether the touch was very much genuine or ingenuine. So, thus working with others and using touch to communicate, a manager needs to be aware of each person's touch tolerance. This is very important to understand that how the other person will tolerate that touch, because that other person will have all the sense to use during that time when he or is being touched by the other person. The other category is friendship or warmth expression. It is about warmth, it is about affection, it is about positive emotion. For example, a mother hugs her child, be it is a physical affection, but it is expressing, or it is a way to display love for his or her child. So, this is about friendship or warmth expression. Any two friends who are playing together, when they are touching each other, that shows about the display of friendship and the extent of friendship between two people. This is about friendship or warmth expression. The other is social or polite expression. It is a very ritual expression. For example, two teams who were competing, one team has won, the other has lost. So, the losing team will wish the winning team, the captain of the winning team, with a shake hand. Another touch of a firm shake hand can be that a person has been recognized in public for his good performance, or it can be also a way to say goodbye to the other person. So, this is a very ritual interaction, that how some touch gestures will convey some ritual messages to the other person. So, the initial connection to another person in a professional setting usually starts off with a touch. So, two members who are meeting for the first time in the group will definitely start their interaction while shaking hands. So, this is a ritual interaction, how to initiate that conversation between two people, specifically a handshake. On the other hand, a handshake is not only limited to a professional setting, but also in an important aspect of youth team sports, or it can represent the end of game as an embodied ritual. So, maybe the captains of the two teams may be winning or losing, they will end the game by shaking hands and wishing best to each other. So, these touches, which are very much ritualistic, they convey a sense of intimacy, that means friendship or very close friendship, and it becomes a legal gesture that is how it goes. So, this is about social or polite expression, where certain touches legalized, they are ritualistic, they are acceptable, and people tend to understand the meaning in those actions and touches. And the other is love or intimacy expression. This is about emotional attachment. Two people who are interacting for a longer period of time, maybe they are impersonal in the initial stages, but with the gradual process of interaction, they tend to hold each other's hand, they put their arm around the other person's shoulder, that will display some kind of intimacy between two people, that means they are together. So, this is about love or intimacy expression. So, the primary nonverbal behavior has the biggest effect on interpersonal relationship. So, this kind of touch will define the kind of or level of a relationship between two people. So, the relationship moves from impersonal to personal. As I mentioned just now, that when two people who are new, maybe they are interacting with each other for a longer period of time, but with the gradual process of interaction, they come more close to each other. There is more proximity between two people, and from impersonal they shift to personal relationship. So, that personal becomes interpersonal to an intimate level. So, when a couple is holding hands or putting their arms around each other, this is a tie sign showing that they are together. So, this is about expression of intimacy and how one touch can become impersonal and from impersonal to personal. So, these are the categories of haptics in form of functional or professional expression, which speaks about task orientation. The other is friendship or warmth expression, which talks about positive emotion. Social or polite expression, which talks about ritual interaction, maybe between two people or two teams. Or love or intimacy expression, it is about emotional attachment. These are certain symbolic to the hapticos. About the first one as the task orientation touch, the other is handshake, the other is about friendship, then about positive emotion, a mother is hugging her child, the other is again the intimate expression, and the other is again friendship. So, that is how even the pictures will reflect based on the touch that what kind of relationship do exist or what kind of touch reflects which kind of message or communication in these pictures. Alright, the next is context of touch. As I mentioned before starting this discussion, that every touch has its own meaning. People are very much sensitive to those touches. At the same time, their tolerance also varies from person to person, because sensitivity is varying because of the touch, then tolerance will also vary from person to person. So, psychologists have talked about certain dimensions pertaining to the context of touch, that is, these includes intensity, duration, location, frequency and instrument of touch. Intensity when it comes to touch relates to how delicate or how strong the touch is. So, that is about the sensitivity. Even any sensitive person will sense that what is the force of that touch. It is strong, it is very gentle, and how that intensity will convey a certain message to the other person. Suppose any employee who fails to perform to the optimum level, maybe he will be little bit sad and demotivated. So, maybe the boss can put a gentle hand on his shoulder, which will convey a message that maybe next time you can perform well. Now, the same gentle hand if has been put on any female worker's shoulder, that will give a kind of different message to that girl, because the girl has its own senses to understand and more own sensitivity and tolerance to understand that touch. This is intensity. Duration, it means relates to how short or prolonged the touch was. Any co-worker can keep his or her hand on his co-worker for a longer period of time because of some kind of untoward incident that happened at workplace, and the person wants to console. So, the longer the duration, the longer the person will communicate his support to the other co-worker. Location refers to the area where the person was touched, a very sensitive dimension of haptics, that which area has been touched by the person. If it is about shoulder, it is about support. If it is about touching the back, then it has a different message of we can do better next time. Yes, if it is about to some other person, then definitely that sensitivity and tolerance will also vary in that person and situation. Frequency represents the number of touches that happen. Two employees who are very close, very informal to each other, they would meet frequently, they would share all the kind of information and conversation with each other in a very cordial manner. So, maybe they will hug, they will hold their hands, maybe they will do high five, they can touch each other's shoulder. That is the frequency of the touches which will define the meaning, the context of that touch. And the last is instrument of touch, which refers to the touch with other body parts like feet, hands and other objects as well. This is again something very sensitive and tolerant context of touch. For example, any co-worker may call his co-worker maybe with his hands or maybe patting his index finger on his shoulder to listen to him, or through his pen, knocking the pen on his shoulder. That gives a very different context to the other person, maybe the other person is very dominating. So, this is something that the person will try to understand the way that shoulder has been touched by the other person, it is by the finger or it is by a pen. So, these are the different context of touch which gives different messages to the other person, and every message that is being transferred to the target person will be interpreted based on his tolerance and sensitivity. That is why we just mentioned in the first slide, I will just go back to the first slide, that is the most sophisticated and intimate sense of communication of the 5 senses. This is very important. The sensitivity will define the context of the touch, right. Next is meaning of touch, different meanings that we can accord to one touch. The first is positive effect. So, these touches communicate positive emotions that occur mostly between persons who have close relationships such as support, appreciation, inclusion and affection. A meeting is going on and another co-worker just joins a meeting in the middle of the board, then maybe the boss will welcome that person in the middle of the meeting with a hand on his shoulder. So, that gives a sense, understanding to the person that he is welcome and the boss is very much inclusive of that person in that meeting. So, this is about positive effect or emotion. So, one touch can convey or communicate positive emotions such as support, appreciation, inclusion and affection. The other is playfulness. The touches serve to lighten an interaction. Maybe in any meeting the co-workers become very tensed talking to each other, interacting with each other. Maybe the third member would intervene and will start any lively conversation by patting the back or the shoulder on his co-worker, and immediately the tension will go down, it will fade away and the conversation becomes very lively and bright. Control. These touches are initiated by the person who attempts to influence, that means some kind of influence or control that person wants to impose on the other person. So, these touches can be further classified as compliance, attention getting and announcing a response. This is about control. Ritual. These touches consist of greeting and departure touches, as we mentioned in the categories of haptics also, that how certain touches are ritual and it is readily understandable to any other person in a very simple and clear manner. The other is accidental touch, that is we are walking in a crowd and we just brush our shoulders with a stranger and we understand that this is all by mistake and we just move on. So, these touches are perceived as unintentional and have no meaning, because two persons who have brushed their shoulders in crowd, there is no relationship, they are just passing by. So, it is absolutely unintentional and have no meaning. So, this is about meaning of touch. This is all about haptics. We talked about kinesthetics, we talked about proxemics, we talked about chronomics and last we have talked about haptics. So, we are through with this section of verbal and nonverbal communication. We will start with a new topic in the new session. Thank you so much.